So I'm LOＩC Charpentier, I'm Policy Manager at Water Europe, and I will manage this first panel on the devastating pathway of the 21st century, as mentioned by Richard. And here the panel will try to reply to what are and will be the environmental consequences of climate change in Africa and in the Mediterranean. So I will be joined on this online stage by Dr. HARTWIG KREMER, Senior Manager of the United Nations Technology Innovation Accelerator, AYENEW TESSERA FENTA, Acting Regional Manager of the Nile Basin Disclosure, and Dr. DOMINIQUE BEROD, Head of the Earth System Monitoring Division of the World Meteorological Organizations. But before to open the floor and to reply to your questions and to exchange about this topic, I would like to let the floor of two videos prepared by the speakers on the topic.
Water has always been a trajectory of development, cultural development, and human well-being. The Mediterranean is a prime example where the dimension of water cuts across natural boundaries. Clean and sufficient water is a major natural capital, and thus in the center of sustainable development. Competing demands for food and energy, as well as pressures such as climate change and pollution, are really devastating this resource. A nexus approach embraces all these dimensions and interlinkages by bringing energy and climate, as well as food production together. It's an all-of-society process in which all the players come together to come to a common objective and address water quality in the center of sustainable development. This nexus approach is also embraced by the World Water Quality Alliance, which brings science, technology, innovation, all the players down to the community level to this dialogue and a solutions platform.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is AYENEW from Africa, Ethiopia. The topic I'm given to speak today is very vast and could not be addressed in a short video clip like this. So it would be simply a brief highlight of the major topics involved. Under the general topic, the devastating pathway of the 21st century, I would try to answer the question, what are and will be the environmental consequences of climate change in Africa and the Mediterranean region? Before I go to the answer, let me highlight few facts about Africa and the Mediterranean region. Africa is the second largest continent in the world, covering 30 million square kilometers. Africa has an estimated population of over 1.2 billion, making it the 11th largest economy in the world. Africa contributes less than 4% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and yet it is one of the regions most hit by climate impacts. Africa is considered to be the world's hottest continent, where around 60% of land is dry and covered by desert. Thus, Africa's vulnerability to climate variability is generally well understood. Africa's vulnerability to climate change is the result of a combination of social, economic, and other environmental factors that interact with climate change. The non-climate vulnerabilities include high population growth rates, the highest in the world, poverty, malnutrition, low literacy rates, disease, poor governance, corruption, conflicts, and weak institutions, all giving Africa low capacity to adapt to climate impacts. So now, what are the environmental consequences of climate change in Africa and the Mediterranean region? Current situations indicate that climate change has huge consequences on water. Over 300 million people in Africa do not have reasonable access to safe drinking water and adequate sanitation, giving it the lowest water supply coverage of any region in the world. Most countries in the Mediterranean and Saharan region of North Africa are presently experiencing water stress. With a predicted general decrease in rainfall, this may hamper access to water for millions of inhabitants. Climate change has also a huge impact on health. Africa is prone to vector-borne diseases that are influenced by climate elements. About 90% of all malaria cases occur in Africa, and more than 110 million people in Africa live in regions prone to malaria epidemics. Impact is also very huge on agriculture and food security. Agriculture accounts for 20 to 40% of GDP in Africa. Even without climate change, there are serious concerns about agriculture in Africa due to water supply variability, soil degradation, and recurrent droughts. A number of countries face semi-arid conditions that make agriculture a challenging business in the continent. Climate change has also impacts on environment, leading to conflicts and migration. Africa is home to several resource-based conflicts. In recent years, North Africa has experienced vast migration pressures from both migrants that settle in the region from the south or that use North African countries as a transit area to reach Europe. Climate change has also impacts on tourism and energy, especially as most African countries are dependent on hydropower, which is most vulnerable to climate variabilities. Climate change impacts on land and marine ecosystems are also clear and visible. In the future, the consequences are also huge in these same sectors, agriculture and food security, for instance. Under a business as usual scenario, a 2 degrees Celsius increase could, by 2050, result in 12 million people at risk from hunger as a result of falling crop yields. Impacts on glaciers and water supply is also predicted. Projections show that the majority of glaciers on Mount Kilimanjaro could vanish in the next 15 years if the recession of the ice cap continues. By 2050s, Northern and Southern Africa will experience a general reduction in average annual runoff. Impacts on health is also predicted. It is predicted that in Africa, climate change could be responsible for an additional 21 to 67 million people at risk of malaria by 2080s. Impacts on land and marine ecosystems are also predicted. Impacts on urban settlements and urban infrastructure, especially in the coastal areas, as also expected. Impacts on migration and conflict is also expected. Climate change will create new environmental conflict hotspots that could lead to a significant increase in national and international conflicts over shared environmental resources, land and water. So now the question is, what is the solution? Africa Union Commission has come up with a 10 years strategy, 2022 to 2032. The strategy is informed by Agenda 2063. It is also informed by Paris Climate Agreement and the UN Agenda 2030. The strategy has identified key areas for action. But the question now is, would Africa really implement this strategy, given its limited technical, financial, and technological capacity? This is the question for everyone to answer. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.
So, thank you for these two first video to introduce a little bit the topic. And in fact, I would like to start with one question, and partly to Dr. Dominique BEROD to react a little bit on what AYENEW was saying, that you have a climate impact on land, but also on marine ecosystem. Do you think that it will be as bad as we can imagine for the impact of climate change in Africa and Mediterranean area?
Yeah, first, good morning all. And to answer short, yes, I'm afraid so. And not just because of all the modeling and predictions, but because of the reality. We are facing that. We are seeing what's happening with the increase of temperature and effect of all those domains that was highlighted by the two videos. So yes, I think the point of mitigation is still to continue, but we need to adapt and we need to find a good resilience, because the reality shows that we are going in that direction. Yes.
Thank you. Artie, what do you think? You echo with what Dominique was saying about the situation?
I do echo that. I hope you can hear me well. First of all, good to see you all, and also good to see you, Dominique, again. Yeah, I echo that, because if you look into particularly, for instance, in the Eastern Mediterranean region and the Middle East, I mean, we observe an increase of marine heat waves, which are affecting biodiversity, ecosystems, and with increased humidity, and effects on the atmospheric circulation, notably the near surface wind dimensions. They also combine and come together with something that you can encounter as urban heat waves. And there is a direct effect of what happens in the ocean to the ecosystem of the ocean in itself, but also to people living on land and what they suffer from in terms of increased humidity, increased temperature, and so on. And that in a region that is forecasted to dramatically urbanize over the next couple of decades, with an expectation, particularly in the Middle East and Eastern Mediterranean, Northern Africa, to reach something of almost 80% urban population in 2050.
And do you think that the technology that we are now can be sufficient to tackle that, and which one we need to implement, or do we need to have more research to make sure to understand and develop the right technology at the right price? Or
shall I give that a kick, the first one? Then I give the floor to Dominique. So the answer is yes. I mean, we do have a lot of technologies in place, but I think Andrea Hinwood in her opening said something which is remarkably important, and that is basically we have not been in the past. We have not been planning cities and urban surroundings and urban settlements for these kind of conditions. So when it comes to transport, to energy demand, water supplies, but also the aging infrastructure that is in place that needs to be tackled also in terms of, for instance, digitalization, smart meters, what have you. There will be projected changes in near surface wind in the Eastern Mediterranean area, which will probably have as an implication that we have less opportunities for renewables from wind energy, and we should strongly move towards photovoltaic probably. So the answer is, in principle, technology, yes. Practically, aging infrastructure and the absence of urban planning in a way that is really smart and applies green and nature-based solutions for tackling also urban heat islands is something that has yet to come. And in principle, I would say there is a very strong need to empower the local governments towards adaptation measures and think about national scales and transboundary scales when it comes to really higher level mitigation. So that would be my 50 cents here answer on that question.
Thank you. Do you want to react, Dominique?
Yes, please. Just to add 50 cents to get $1. Jointly with us, I used to work together on that. No, I think, yes, technology can help, but that will be never enough. And we need research, not only for improving the technology, but as well to better understand what's happening. Among all the effects of climate change, it is as well the variability of the events. There is an increasing new type of events coming at a bizarre season, and we need to better understand that because it's unpredictable. And that's the main thing. So with the whole modeling we have until now, the whole forecast system, and you might have heard from the call from the UN Secretary General on having an early warning for all within 5 years, we have to speed up the research. And I see two good news in all these. As HARTWIG said, we need not only new infrastructure, but we need to adapt the existing one. On climate change, now that is real, it's a kind of incentive for politicians, for decision makers to invest there. On some of them, we'll see the value of starting a new economy phase in improving that situation. And the other improvement I would see, the other good point is there are many startups, small and to medium enterprise that are very agile, very innovative, and they show up. We see them because they're bringing new solutions, and we have to listen to them. On those startups that are not only in the good old Europe or US, that as well everywhere in Africa, and that's an excellent news.
And so I will try also to echo a little bit of what you are saying, because in Water Europe, we are dealing with the objective to achieve a water smart society, so to have water resilience, security, and sustainability. here we have two main objectives from our side. One is to promote research and innovations, and partly on adapting the new infrastructure and go for more hybrid green infrastructure. And the discussion that we have internally was to say that if we go only for a blue infrastructure or green infrastructure, they will not be able to face the extreme weather impact. We cannot rely only on them. But at the same time, the green infrastructure that we have, we cannot. Also, we need really to adapt. So do you agree that we need to have this hybrid green-gray infrastructure, or we should push only for green and blue infrastructure as some association, at least in Europe, from the perspective that I have, are really pushing for that?
So if I can jump in, I think we need multiple solutions. There is no one fits all on one solution, which is perfect for everything. We need to evaluate all what's existing and to move along, knowing the users, who need that, what are the needs, what are the ability of a population, and then to adapt to those, not to come from a kind of top-down technology that will never work. So we have to listen to the people, and especially to those who are silent. It's like when you are in an emergency room at the hospital, the one who is the most silent is one who is the most in danger. So we have to take care of that first. So do not imagine to have the solution for all, but try to work with all the users you have, all the stakeholders, the players, and listen to them first, and then build on that. And
so I will continue to a little bit work with that. I'm sorry, but yeah, so you mentioned that we need to involve more the different stakeholders to really understand how we can do that, especially in the case of water that we are a little bit discussing here. And we had the UN Water Report 23 pushing for more collaboration and partnership. How do you think we can shape it? Which partner needs to be around the table? Is it only the silent one, but do we need also to have the financial institution, the local authorities, or how do you foresee? Do you have good example to mention here?
So if I continue, HARTWIG, sorry, taking the floor too much, but yeah, I think at WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, we're starting what we call a user requirement process. When we start a project, and we have one around the Lake Chad, with the countries all around in the basin of the lake, and in the order to build an information system on water, to increase forecast abilities, to increase the knowledge of the behavior of the whole basin on the lake. And then we first invited authorities, and then we had a workshop on days where we invited as well villages, communities, fisher, and farmers to listen to them. What are your problems? What would you like to see within 1 year, within 5 years? And then to build on that. So we have some examples, but we are starting. And I must say, the price to pay is that we need more time to build a project. But once there, it's more solid, because the ownership will be with the users, or not with the one who is imagining the solution.
Thanks. HARTWIG, do you want to react?
Yeah, I would like to react to a couple of points, and I would like to go back first of all to the discussion we had a bit earlier on the gray-green infrastructure. I do agree with Dominique that really needs to be always a combination based on the different user demands. I would like to actually stress an example that's not from that region. It's from another region. It's from Latin America, and that's the Itaipu system, which is probably the second largest hydropower dam in the world. That's a great infrastructure, obviously, but it's important, and it's transboundary. It's combining 3 countries. At the same time, the lake was subject to a kind of green agricultural management regime where farmers were educated and involved in the process of developing, let's say, erosion diminishing agricultural practice for 2 purposes. One being to increase their livelihood and production of agricultural crops of high value, at the same time to increase the survival time of the dam, because to reduce erosion has now finally resulted in a projected lifetime of this massive infrastructure to go up by 6-fold. And that makes a lot of sense. So it will always be a combination of different technological and infrastructural investments. Stakeholder driven, absolutely. I think I do agree with that. When it comes to who should collaborate, I mean, go back to an example which is water driven in the region. We are talking about, let's say, projections of reducing stream flows in the Euphrates, Tigris and the Jordan system, which may go up, subject to which climate scenario you are applying. But if you go the worst case, which is the business as usual, the 8.5, then you may end up in something which is in the order of 70 to 80% reduction of stream flow. And that needs to bring the people to the table as to how do you want to respond to that? What are the alternatives in terms of, let's say, using alternative water resources, wastewater reuse, and so on? And that needs to be bought into by the respective stakeholders. It may be different in the Nile system, because from projections and the fact that the Nile originates in the Mara and in tropical areas, it will probably not face a shortage of water in a comparable fashion. But there you have this massive transboundary issue with damming and actually bringing the people to the same table. So what I would say is what it needs is a social political process that develops a joined up thinking about the ecosystem goods and services and the value, also the economic services that are connecting upstream and downstream.
And if I may to react a little bit of what you are saying, because we were mentioning earlier that the technology needs also to come from the ground, and we cannot have a top-down implementation of the solution always. In the context of transboundary cooperation, do you think that international or regional association, for example, in Africa, you have the African Union, but or regional institutions, such organization can really play a role here to have a common thinking around a basin, or it should really come from the ground, if I can say like this?
Oh, yeah. Let me go first, Dominique, then I hand over to you. That was a topic that I was addressing in the freshwater high-level panel that started the Oceans Conference in Lisbon last year. I think it's both, because at the end of the day, if you look at the so-called northwestern hemisphere, what has really triggered successful transboundary river basin management, like in the Rhine or in the Elbe? Either social political surprise, like the breakdown of the Soviet Union, same applying to the Danube River, or a massive disaster, which was the Sandoz disaster in the Rhine case. We had the River Rhine Commission for 50, 60, 70 years out there. But what really triggered people to understand what are the services that Rotterdam receives from upstream factories and chemical industries, and what Rotterdam delivers to those in return, and what the costs and implications are for Rotterdam dredging harbor sludges, which cannot be dumped anymore because they are so toxic. That kind of triggered a joined up thinking, which finally made a massive, massive step change. Same with the Danube, and basically the economies and the agriculture kind of collapsed in many riparian states after this social political change that finally ended up in a massive ecosystem recovery in the Black Sea. And now we have the legal instruments in place, like the Water Framework Directive and the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, to capture that. So going back to Africa and Mediterranean, a river basin commission can do a lot in this respect. What it requires, though, is an open, transparent dialogue in a joined-up thinking fashion of what are the services that one or the other receives on the different parts of the river. If you stick to the Nile Delta and you talk about the Renaissance Dam, for instance, then you see immediately the implications that could make Egypt, for instance, look at it very differently than Ethiopia. One looking at it from the energy perspective, the other one from the urgent need for fertile sludges and soils and sediments coming down the river in order to stabilize the agricultural production. It needs both, as I said. It needs the local people, it needs the river basin commissions, and it needs the political will to work in this transboundary context. And you have the global, I would say, political and normative framework in the two river conventions.
So thanks. Do you want to react, Dominique?
Yes, but just to build on that, yes, I think dialogue is the is the key. And when we are talking about involving users, stakeholders, and so on, it's because we need to shift our mindset to a co-design approach, and then to cooperate, and then to construct the solution all together, and then being clear on the messages, because we cannot just accept everything that is coming out, but we have to streamline a little bit, and that dialogue will help a lot. So you're mentioning different organizations, without forgetting the basin organizations. That can be key for the management of the resources, but as well to install that dialogue and to get a kind of common understanding on being a part of a catchment. Even if I'm upstream, being at the top, I can decide to send the water or not. It's more than that. It's about solidarity, working together, and it's as well, I would say, about ethical behavior to understand that other might have need today, and I might have need in 2 weeks or in 20 years, and we have to work together to go there. So those organizations can help as well to understand that that kind of dynamic and the respect of all those who having enough water might have too much water, those having not enough might have more water quality. So we have to work together to build on that. So co-design for me is a key word.
That's what I meant by joined up thinking. That is actually, that's what the basin organizations probably can trigger most successfully.
Yeah.
Okay, and if I can jump a little bit to another topic that we touched during since the beginning a little bit, it's about rural populations and the link between rural areas and urban areas. I remember, for example, a speech of the Commissioner Varelli from the neighborhood in the European Union during the Cairo Water Week in October 22, mentioning the need to achieve a water smart society and to have a lot of investment in water infrastructure to ensure water security in Egypt. And I was wondering that we have more and more rural population going to the urban areas to improve their quality of life and well-being, here, to what extent is the current work being undertaken in cities is sufficient to guarantee the sustainable future of the cities, but also to absorb this quantity of population that can move in these urban centers? I don't know if Dominique or Hartwig wants to start.
I prefer Hartwig to start. He's more smart.
Okay, fine. So that's totally fine. So the question is basically, just to repeat that I got it right, that you say we definitely see the migration from rural population towards urban centers. And yes, following climate projections, notably in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East, I would say there will be huge landscapes and climate regimes which will become uninhabitable almost. Do the cities cope with that? And do they have the right strategies in place? I would say some go in this direction, many don't. For instance, just to give you an example, if you project a temperature increase in Athens, for instance, throughout the next century or this century, following the climate scenarios, and let's go for the pessimistic one, then we'll probably talk about 6 to 7 degrees, plus what comes on top through the urban heat island effect, which is another 3 to 4 degrees. What that means in terms of urban planning towards addressing the health effects that this will have, collapses, syncopia, strokes, and the infrastructure that requires. what it also means in terms of establishing proper early warning that also allows citizens, by using citizen science tools, digital tools, for instance, to find safe spaces. What that also means in order to, let's say, redesign the cities to become more green, applying sponge concepts when it comes to water and water management and addressing the heat waves. That is all there. In principle, you have the ingredients of this soup, but in order to cook it, you need resources and you need to empower the local governments and the mayors to take steps in this direction. Again, it's a process which requires probably a very strong dialogue-based, kind of almost quintuple helix-like approach that brings all the actors together in an urban context. What it also requires would be to address good practice from one place to the other and share. And that means that the cities would need to talk to each other. Sure, in the Mediterranean, you can embed that in a political process like the Barcelona Convention, for instance, or the Mediterranean Action Plan, and bring the cities around the same table. Many places in the Eastern Mediterranean and notably the Middle East are currently struggling with completely different threats like geopolitical disasters and massive fluxes of refugees. So that is an unmanageable problem at this point in time. That would be my first reaction to this question.
Thanks, Dominique.
Yeah, maybe just shortly on generalities. It's not only the migration that is a problem, more people coming to the cities, it's as well the existing problem, for instance, air pollution, traffic jams. So already today, there is a huge problem in many major cities all around the world, not only in Africa. So we have to solve that anyway. And there's some new cities coming in Africa, in China, and that may be the opportunity to rethink the way to build a city with how to manage the water and how to manage the mobility, probably with more public transportation, that kind of things. But that's a little bit an illusion. I tried that. I don't think we have to think rural or cities. It's rural and the cities. It's about managing the territory, given the new conditions we have on climate, on the population growth and the economical changes.
And how do you foresee this? Because we are also here to give a little bit of positive aspect. How do you foresee this connection between rural and urban area, how they can interplay? I remember from our side, we had a discussion about sludge management and how to develop new urban wastewater treatment plants as a resource hub, partly for the rural area. Is it one aspect that we can also foresee in the south or of the Mediterranean regions, or in Africa or in the MENA, or do you have all the big trend that we can push in these regions?
I'm afraid I have no answer on that, but I'm sure HARTWIG will.
No, I'm not so sure I do have a good answer for that. I mean, what that comes down to is basically a value proposition-based connectivity between the rural and the urban areas. And that can be arranged around deliveries of resources. It can also be arranged around connectivity in the sense of providing digital connectivity between the communities and dramatically improving the means of transportation, so that people in the rural areas are not alienated and have the chance to be mobile and have access to the same basic services as people in the urban surrounding have. That applies to certain areas, that applies to certain regions, it doesn't apply to others. So that is my immediate answer to that. I don't think I could go into much more detail because that is really a complex question to which I don't have a better answer at the moment.
No, but it demonstrates a little bit or echo with what AYENEW mentioning in his video, that the wave nexus is also linked to transport, tourism, and any other topic to be really implemented. And
I want to just add one point. Let me just quickly add one point, and that is a point more in what should I say, cultural perception-based. Because Dominique quite rightly said, I mean, the problems, the inefficiency of transportation, communication, energy, and water, and so on, they are there. They are there in many cities across the board, not just in the Mediterranean. You could actually be in any other continent, basically facing same things. But of course, I mean, the Mediterranean is characteristic for two things. One thing is that in the eastern parts now, I mean, we do have these substantive migration and displacement phenomena, which are really putting countries like Jordan, for instance, into a massive stress when it comes to water. Just to stay with that example. It generates a certain perception that is probably counteracting a little bit the urgently needed philosophy of working together. Because, I mean, people feel overloaded. They feel, let's say, not involved in the process of getting more and more people on board. I mean, we have that in this whole migration conversation in Europe as well. And that is very characteristic for the eastern part of the Mediterranean, and it's an issue for which I also don't have an immediate solution because it's getting worse on a daily basis. And the other reason why I think in the Mediterranean is particularly prominent when it comes to resources, the use of water, and people feeling kind of a little bit left behind, is because the population simply, around the coast at least, is simply doubling once a year because of tourism. And that increases, again, massively the demand for resources and planning, and sometimes leaves the local population behind. Those two things I wanted to add because I think they are really characteristic for the region.
So the different structural increase, if I can say like this, but also some peak in terms of consumption and water demand,
yes,
are really hard to manage and might increase if we continue to have massive tourism, for example, from the north of Europe.
Sure.
Going and some people are speaking about, for example, transporting water. Do you foresee that as a part of the solutions, or to have big pipes, if I can imagine, because we had also the same issue with Barcelona 10 years ago, and the topic was on the national news on the other part of the Pyrenees. To build a pipe from France to Spain to provide water in Barcelona. Is it really feasible? Is it wise to have such solutions?
If I give it a first shot, Dom, and then I'll. It's probably a mix of solutions, and there's not the one size fits all. I think if you talk about a big city like Barcelona, it's first and foremost really improving and maintaining existing infrastructure and modernizing it. Then it's also about smart use of water, particularly reuse of rainwater, definitely reuse of wastewater where it is, for instance, for industrial purposes, where the quality does not require such a high standard. The other thing is basically to make sure that you save water, and you are water sensitive in the way you use it, and that you kind of build the understanding, like for instance in cities like Osaka, where you are aware that basically as soon as you open your tap, the water has been 10 times reused. And this kind of perception needs to be growing as well, and the acceptance for that. And there will be different solutions when it comes to smaller communities. The other final thing I wanted to mention when it comes to water and water quality is also the issue of those communities, notably on the coastal zones in Egypt, which are depending on groundwater. The groundwater aquifers are severely in danger for two reasons. One being we have no clue about the replenishment of the natural system in the aquifer, or at least we have limitations in our knowledge. And the second one is we see increasing pollution, and with sea level rise, probably saltwater intrusion. So that means we need to change the approach towards agricultural production as well. It's a really complex thing.
And you both touch a little bit the digital tools in this context. You can develop a little bit more how you foresee, because that might be one part of the solution, and to bring a little bit optimism in these discussions. What could be the type of solution? How digitalization can help beyond the infrastructure, but also to raise awareness about water for the populations?
Well, if I can start on this, first, it helps to raise the awareness for all, and it's a kind of shared responsibility. So we're talking about authorities, researchers, but it's about us, every individual, and we have to know that if we switch the light on and off, there is an impact. And that's the same for water. Even if it's just one glass of water, that's an impact on the whole. So if you have tools to measure what you are consuming, where the water is coming from, then you have a kind of attachment. And I know a case I think in Brazil, in a city in Brazil, where citizens are empowered with tools enabling them to know where the water is coming from in the tap, so they are attached to it. They understand it's not just the tap; it's the sources somewhere in the hill or whatever. So that's growing responsibility. And we are talking a lot about citizen science, citizen observations. For me, it's a part of the whole, raising the responsibility of every individual. So I think it's moving along the right way. So if you want to be optimistic, I think the solution going through the empowering the population, every individual, is a good way.
So, I can only echo that. I think that is absolutely critical what Dominique just said. You were asking also about the tools. I mean, there's two ways of doing that. One is basically you start addressing the issue on the level of the providers of the water utilities, for instance, and then it's about smart meters. It's about, let's say, maintenance of infrastructure and using digital tools for doing that better. That is what, for instance, the GIVOPA program is addressing, sitting in Bonn with the water providers and the groups of water providers. When it comes to addressing that on the local scale, the Water Quality Alliance, for instance, has these local water forums, which are addressing very, very small scale local water problems by bringing that bottom up from the local communities. I mean, there is one initiative in these local water forums, for instance, in the informal settlements in Nairobi, which are the biggest in Africa, Kibera, in which they use digital tools to assess water quality, water access points, and so on. That is really where it comes together. When you combine that by empowering the local communities and the local governments, having a proper database and establishing a proper database of water supply points, how they are distributed in informal settlements, what is the access possibility for the people in the community to get there, etc. That it will improve the availability of a basic service by means of digital tools. When it comes to water resilience, or let's say extreme water event resilience, so talk about flooding, which is the negative part of water when you have too much, then when there is no data, you can use digital tools to identify what are the floodplains, where is the river catchment, how often is it flooded, and it is particularly powerful, and that's what we do in UNITAC, if you use such tools, for instance, to make you as an individual with your experience and your urban reality part of the data generation. Because in the absence of big databases, you can bring in your experience, say my property is flooded twice per week or twice per year to that amount, and it's getting worse. Then you become a geo-referenced source of information in an urban planning map for water resilience that evolves. And that brings ownership into the process. So that's also about ownership. And the final point, I would say, you can definitely use digital tools to improve early warning and resilience. And that's also a matter of observation, including air quality, not just water.
And so you touch both also citizen science in this context and linked to digital tools. When I listened, for example, the conference of the UN Water Quality Alliance in Nairobi 2 months ago, and a little bit the example that you just stressed, I have the impression that citizen science is working better in the Mediterranean, south part of the Mediterranean area or in Africa than in Europe, and they have more the leadership of such type of setup for dealing with the WEFE. Do you think, do you agree with this assessment? And if yes, why is it the case? Dominique or HARTWIG, no reaction.
I do not have this experience, I must say, because when you say citizen science, it's people getting together to solve a problem they have in common, and knowing that the authority may not be able to provide those. And I have good experience in many places, not only in Europe or elsewhere. And there are organizations that are helping those to develop. So I cannot tell have this experience. And citizen science, in some cases, it's because we have to. In some cases, it's because it's better to. And it should be it should be both. So I cannot tell have that what you're telling. I cannot assess if what you're telling is true or not.
I would echo that. I would echo that, because we have good examples and bad examples from places all over, and there's plenty of good examples, particularly where citizen science projects, for instance, in Northern Europe, have even had an influence on elections. But this is about air quality monitoring, for instance. And in principle, you could say, as long as you mobilize the local community with a proper scientific accompanying of the process to generate data which otherwise wouldn't exist, or to complement other observations, to provide ground truthing also when it comes to, let's say, machine learning based algorithms that help you model informal settlements. Somebody needs to go around the creeks and the houses and the settlements to see whether you can ground truth these findings. That is a modus operandi that generates ownership, and I think then citizen science can be successful everywhere.
Okay, thanks. I will finish with two questions. One tricky one.
We're all tricky so far.
But this one is more particular because I know Richard likes this topic about inequality and gender, and I would like to ask you here, because we were speaking about the WEFE, the importance of how we can deal with the climate change in these regions. Gender equality and health are two main topics for the region, where some of the region are in the war situation. How do you foresee the situation for the population in terms of health and inequalities in the coming years in some region? It will be better or worse, if I can say like this,
or both. I think on the paper better, in practice maybe worse for the years to come, and then to go to improvement. I'm telling that because I think there is a rising awareness of that all those questions of disparity, of gender inequality has an impact on everything. So it's a whole, and we have to think. Well, maybe to talk a little bit broader on that, when we're talking about ecology or economy, it's the same word. It's eco, being the house in the ancient Greek. So it's all, if you can understand that it's all the same. And if we are discriminating people, if we are discriminating nature, it's all the same movement. I think there is I hear something coming that will improve those situations. And now with climate change, with all the water stress we have in many places all around the world, we see that we need solidarity. And the gender balance or the overall question of dealing with minorities is getting awareness. I am simply afraid that in the coming years, it will be worsening. But thanks to that awareness on thinking that we need solution coming from the ground, from the population, then it will be getting better. That's my hope.
Thanks. And so last question now. I think it, and we will close with some minute before the time, and you will have a break after this 1 hour and a half conference. But I would like to ask you, Dominique and HARTWIG, would you describe yourself as being optimistic or pessimistic with regard to environmental challenges over the coming 30 years for the regions? I don't know. HARTWIG, do you want to start?
I start because okay. Let me just quickly go back to the one question that you asked before on the disparity issue and the gender issue and so on. If you look at it from the pressures that are, let's say, growing in the region, like climate change, for instance, when it comes to it's also a matter of effect. If you talk about health effects, for instance, then of course elderly people, pregnant women, and young children are probably the most disadvantaged ones. Those who live in informal settlements or in refugee camps are the most vulnerable ones. When it comes to connectivity, being educated properly in order to leverage on the advantages of data, digital tools, and so on and so forth. That's simply a matter of, do you have access to information? Do you get the equal rights towards being educated in school, which is also an issue in the wider region that has cultural dimensions and belief system dimensions. That's quite a complex thing. And if you were asking me, is that going to improve over the next time? I would say probably not. I would rather say that pretty stable, unless we also have a major shift in social political systems. And on the optimistic question, over the next 30 years, probably in the next 30 years, climate change will be more or less slowly growing in its effects, irrespective of which scenario we apply. But in the second half of the 21st century, I think it will be very different, subject to how much greenhouse gases will be emitted from the region, and the region is one of the highest greenhouse gas emitters, unless there is a major change towards really modernizing transportation, energy, and everything along the nexus, for instance. So I would be optimistic if I could say we can find a solution for the dramatic pressure that is currently coming from geopolitical conflicts and migrations. Unless we do that, I'm pessimistic. That is my statement, yeah.
Thanks. HARTWIG, Dominique?
Yes, I'm reasonably pessimistic. That's the thing. I mean, I'm not completely hopeless. What we see, what's happening now with all what we are experiencing with the climate, heat wave, flood, droughts, all the same in the same time, then with a huge impact on societies, on people, I am very pessimistic, and mostly because I see that it's about egoistic. We are all egoistic. I think in one of the second video, we show that Africa is it's the less producing continent on CO2 and others, but it's the most impacted through climate. It's because we're all egoistic in our behavior, and we have to change that. And that may hope, first because after the COVID, after heat waves, after floods, we try to understand that everything is connected. It's complex because it's all interconnected. Health and climate and environment, it's all connected. I think we start to understand that, and the WEF you're mentioning, so the water, energy, food, the environment, is a step toward that. And you might have heard that some movement in New Zealand, in India, to consider rivers as legal entities. And I think that's a very smart move, because that change your understanding of the nature. And you do consider that a river might have rights as you have as an individual. It's about being holistic, to understand that if we have one impact somewhere, that may be impact elsewhere that we cannot understand. And that's related to your question of having a water pipeline somewhere. Maybe yes, maybe not. If it fits to other purposes, then yes. If all the local solutions are not met, then probably. But we have to think, if we are taking water from somewhere, this water will do not exist anymore on that place. What are the impact? Not today, but in 20 or 50 years. So if we start thinking broad in terms of linking all the processes, and linking as well the time on the scale, we may go somewhere, but it's highly complex. That's why I'm still on the pessimistic side, but not hopeless.
Thank you.
Can I add one sentence to that?
Sorry?
Can I add one sentence to that?
Yes.
Because Dom mentioned something which has really blown me off my chair when I heard it for the first time. You said, give a legal entity to a river, a legal personality. I heard that the first time actually from indigenous Maori in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
And what that actually underlines is the following. What we really haven't tapped on properly yet is the knowledge and experience from traditional sources or indigenous sources. And there might be some models in there, notably on local scale or system scale, where you can really foster the joined up thinking and the buy-in from all of society to address the issues by proper strategies. And that has to grow from local and really respectful leveraging on these kind of knowledge asset holders.
On this river in New Zealand, I think it's called the Wanganui River.
Exactly.
So let's invite her to the next conference.
Thanks, Dominique. Richard, if you heard. First of all, I would like to thank you for these fruitful discussions. What I will keep also with me here is that the majority of the solution exists, but we do not have one that fit for everybody, and we need to adapt to the solutions. And we still need to invest in research and innovation, partly with the new extreme events coming up. That water is always linked to all, and the WEFE plus else is really important in terms of climate change. But if I zoom a little bit more on water, we really need to ensure that everybody is aware about the value of water, to exploit the value in water, including resources, water efficiency, and water reuse. So it means that we need to update our infrastructure to be more circular, more efficient, and make sure that we have green infrastructure. Digital tools will also play a key role here, and they are part of the solution. Also to strengthen inclusive governance, to provide access to information, improve health. But we really need investment, cooperation, trust, and to think out of the box to make sure that we gather all the input, including the old traditions or traditional aspect that might be a source of inspiration to across the different continents and regions. And so I will stop here. And I thank you once again, Dominique and HARTWIG, for this discussion and this input. And I will offer to the audience 2 additional minutes for a break. And I hope that you will follow the rest of the sessions.